Hello and welcome to our first Civic Saturday. My name is Andy Moore. I'm the Executive Director of Let's Fix This, and I will be your MC for today's program. I'm so excited for you to be here, whether you are joining us live or if you're watching this months from now on Facebook or YouTube. Thanks for being here. We hope that you get something worthwhile out of what we're doing this morning. If you don't know about Let's Fix This, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is built around the power and importance of being involved in a community, in society, with politics, with civics, and civic engagement, however you want to phrase it. We try to make it easier to understand what can often be complex governmental things, like how the government works, and particularly at the state and local level. And we love creating opportunities for people to be involved and to engage with their government in meaningful ways. Now, then a couple of years ago, I became aware of an organization called Citizen University that is based in Seattle. And if you're in Oklahoma City, you know that we have a weird relationship with Seattle going back many decades. 4 years ago, Citizen University developed and began hosting Civic Saturday gatherings there in their town. And since then, they've been traveling around the country hosting them in different cities and connecting with people in those communities to carry on the gathering there locally. Earlier this year, I had the honor of attending their Civic Saturday Fellowship program, and this is officially our first Civic Saturday. We're doing it virtually because COVID. Last year, we had the opportunity when Citizen University came to Oklahoma City to help co-host an in-person Civic Saturday with our colleagues at Generation Citizen, and it was an amazing event. We did it at the Paramount Theater here in Oklahoma City. We got to be in person, shake hands, meet in civic circles, and really kind of discuss some of the stuff that was presented and shared at Civic Saturday. I look forward to being able to do that with all of you, again, hopefully in the not too distant future. And until then, we're going to use the magic of the internet, these wires and magic tubes, to do this virtually. This is our first go. I've got plans for the next one and the one after that, and I hope that you will attend those and be involved. So if you're not familiar with the Civic Saturday concept, it is an analog for a faith service. So if you've ever been to a church service, it's kind of like that. But our creed is community, our faith is in our neighbors, and our truth is that we are all connected, interdependent, affected by and accountable to one another. This collective sense of us that we have, or we should have, because that is how we live. Civic Saturday gatherings are about what it means to live in America, and specifically for us here in Oklahoma, a chance to reflect on what it means to be an active member of your community, to wrestle with how we live out the ideals of what it means to be a good citizen. So you may hear me talk about citizenship. I'm not referring to that as a legal status, but more as a verb, the actions that we take to live in society with one another, how to care for one another, how to hold one another accountable, how to demand justice and extend empathy to our neighbors. If we are all in person together, this is the part where I would ask you to turn to your neighbor, shake hands, and say in your best Mr. Rogers voice, "Hello, would you like to be my neighbor?" Instead, let's pause for a moment to reflect and to center ourselves before we begin our Civic Saturday service. So I will ask you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and picture the largest tree that you have ever seen. Think about what the bark looks like, the color of the leaves. Picture it extending out of the ground, a big, thick, strong trunk reaching to the sky. From that trunk, big limbs coming out, those limbs becoming branches, those branches becoming twigs, stretching out far beyond the base of the tree itself. Realize that you are part of the tree, but which part are you? Are you the trunk? Are you one of the limbs? Are you a leaf at the tip waving in the wind? Are you an acorn or a pine cone, ready to leap off of that tree and become a new tree somewhere else? You can open your eyes. The thing about a tree is that we call it a tree, not a big heap and pile of limbs and branches and twigs. When it's growing and thriving and healthy, it is a tree. And a well-functioning democracy, I think, is a bit like that. A city, a town, a state, a country is like a tree when it's growing and thriving and healthy. We're more than just a pile of sticks. We are a tree. Okay, on that note, I would like to welcome my good friend Chris Weiser to the show. Hello, Chris.
Well, how are you, Andy?
I'm great. Thanks for being here. Chris is going to lead us in a couple of songs today, so I'll let you take it away.
Take it away. Here we go. Sometimes in our life, we all have pain. We all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we will know that there's tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, boy. It won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can feel those of your needs that you won't let show. You just call on the brother if you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you understand. We all need somebody to lean on. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, boy. It won't be long. I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on the brother. You need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load that you must bear, that you can't carry, I'm right up the road, and I'll share your load. If you just call me, you just call me. If you need a friend, all you gotta do is call me. If you need a friend, all you gotta do is call me. You know I'll be there for you. Just call me. Call
Thank you, Chris. That was excellent.
Thank you, Andrew.
We'll hear more from Chris later on in the program. Up next, I'm going to bring two good friends of mine, Scott Melson and Elizabeth Sidler, and they are going to read some Civic Scripture, which are historical texts with roots in our collective history, and hopefully lend some inspiration and context for what we're going to talk about today. Up first.
Our first civic scripture is from the late Senator Margaret Chase of Maine, from her Declaration of Conscience speech delivered in 1950. Those of us who shout the loudest about Americanism in making character assassinations are all too frequently those who, by our own words and acts, ignore some of the basic principles of Americanism. Those principles being the right to criticize, the right to hold unpopular beliefs, the right to protest, the right of independent thought. The exercise of these rights should not cost one single American his reputation or his right to a livelihood, nor should he be in danger of losing his reputation or livelihood merely because he happens to know someone who holds unpopular beliefs. Who of us does not? Otherwise, none of us could call our souls our own. Otherwise, thought control would have set in. The American people are sick and tired of being afraid to speak their minds, lest they be politically smeared as communists or fascists by their opponents. Freedom of speech is not what it used to be in America. It has been so abused by some that it is not exercised by others.
Our next reading is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham City Jail. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people. We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of men willing to be co-workers with God, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation.
From the American author and artist Marianne Radmacher, courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow.
From the farewell address of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. As we peer into society's future, we, you and I and our government, must avoid the impulse to live only for today, plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. Down the long lane of history yet to be written, America knows that this world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be, instead, a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect.
Thank you both for those inspiring words. All right, so now it's back to me for the Civic Sermon today, and this is, we said earlier, an analog for a faith service, so you get about 20 minutes of me saying this. And I will admit, I'm normally very comfortable speaking in front of an audience, and here it is just my camera, and yet I am somewhat nervous. I had a hard time writing this sermon. I put it off, and I started working on it, I don't know, a dozen times over the last few weeks. Sometimes with pen and paper, sometimes on my computer, sometimes just driving around speaking words aloud to myself in the car. But every time I had the same experience, I hit a wall, a mental block. I found it hard to focus on writing because there were so many other things that I needed to worry about. There's COVID, obviously, where earlier this week, Oklahoma surpassed 100,000 cases and saw record-breaking numbers of people in the hospital and the ICU. When we crossed that 100,000 mark on Monday, I did some quick arithmetic and posted the result to Twitter, stating simply that 1 in 37 Oklahomans has been diagnosed with COVID-19. As of today, that tweet, I think, has been shared more than 300 times and liked by more than 600 people, which is a lot because my tweets aren't always that good. And sadly, that did nothing to stop the 5 people that were reported to have died that same day on Monday, or the 50 other deaths that have occurred or been reported this week. I think that by the time this pandemic is over, all of us will have lost someone we know, someone we care about, several someones, to the disease. And I don't know about you, but wondering who that might be or how many. It can be downright crippling at times. Besides COVID, there's obviously the impending election, which arguably is the most important election that our country has faced in several generations. And it sure feels that way, at least, and you can't escape it. Billion-dollar campaigns are the new normal. They've ad buys of millions of dollars at a time, ensuring that no matter where you go or what media you consume, the election is always on the top of your mind. With unprecedented attacks on our electoral process, we have somehow started to look to the companies that we normally love to hate to be truth tellers and reliable sources and to somehow save our democracy. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram have all reminded me at least once a day to register to vote for the last 6 weeks. Even Yelp got in on the process. The other night, I was looking up to see what time Roxy's Ice Cream closed because we needed some late night ice cream. And Yelp was badgering me about registering to vote and making sure that I knew how to cast my ballot. Maybe that's smart, right? I wanted ice cream, I got politics, but maybe they're just trying to catch people in this moment of vulnerability. The COVID-19 pandemic and the impending election are certainly stress-inducing events on their own for lots of reasons, and they also have this multiplier effect on all the other stressors in our life. They've amplified that baseline normal that we're used to, that we experience every day. Something as simple as going to work or buying groceries now requires additional research, planning, strategy. Getting food from a restaurant, buying toilet paper, going for a run, even voting. It's all different this year. We find ourselves cut off from friends and family, restricted to open-air hangouts at the end of the driveway. You're furtively looking at your kids, wondering if they're asymptomatic carriers of a disease that might inadvertently affect their grandparents, causing them to get sick or even die. Hugs, which my family once relished like it was chocolate icing on a yellow cake, have been sidelined completely. So how do we carry on? How do we do anything when everything feels so bizarre, so distant, so uncertain? While circumstances have changed, the associated feelings are not new to most Oklahomans. Most of us, whether we've been affected personally or someone we know, we are uniquely accustomed to the sudden and complete interruption of life. We've all seen or know someone whose life and trees have been uprooted by a sudden tornado in the springtime. I vividly remember my friend John tweeting about watching his house get blown away by a tornado on the news while he sat in the hospital with his newborn child who was in the NICU fighting for life. Or, not tornado related, but another trauma that has affected all of us here, my friend Amy, who sat across the desk from her coworker on April 19th, 1995, sat down to have a brief conversation with her, and a moment later, the floor, the wall, and her coworker all disappeared. This year, 2020, is the 20th anniversary of the Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon and the 25th anniversary of that terrible day. Like everything else, the marathon was forced to become virtual. Registrants received boxes in the mail with your shirt and your medal and a blanket. along with instructions to how to run your race whenever you wanted to, sometime between October 4th and tomorrow, October 18th. I don't know how many of you watching are runners, but there are a lot of marathons out there. Like, a lot. And while they compete over who has the biggest or the coolest medal, Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon is unique. It stands apart from other races because it's about something more than the race itself. It was the first race that I ran, first marathon that I ran, and eventually, when I run this year's, I've not done it yet, it'll be my 6th half marathon, 6th of the Memorial Marathon, 10th half overall. And the reason I haven't run it is, like I said earlier, it's been quite a year and I'm having a hard time finding the motivation to do it. But as I sat down to write this civic sermon, I started thinking about running, and it seems appropriate maybe to use that analogy to talk about perseverance for a few minutes. So regardless of how you feel about running, I think we can all agree that it really is a pretty wonderful analogy for about everything in life. While sports drinks and fancy stretchy clothing have made athleisure wear much more acceptable, and running is quite stylish these days, the truth is running has been a part of human existence since forever. Scientists point to humans' ability to run long distances as one of the keys to us being at the pinnacle of the food pyramid in nature. It enables us to outrun our predators and to catch up with our prey simply by wearing them out. Believe it or not, humans are somewhat designed to just keep going. And that's probably why running has been an analog for getting through life for thousands of years. You know, even in the Bible, the Apostle Paul wrote letters to the church at Corinth and to his friend Timothy, where he used phrases like finishing the race and running to win, which is particularly ironic, I think, because history records Paul as being not just a bald man, but also being blind and perhaps bow-legged, two conditions that would make running unduly difficult for him. So maybe he used those analogies because he knew quite intimately how hard it was to keep going. I took up running in my early 30s after the birth of my first child. Undoubtedly, I was running from some kind of existential dread that was getting old and weak and frail, like we all do. When I started running, I learned a lot about myself, about other people, about how we interact with one another. And when you run through the streets of your city, you become familiar. You get to know all the bumps, all the cracks, the illustrious mansions, the homeless shelters, the glistening lawns, the empty lots, the exhaust of cars and the exhaustion of our resources, the children at the park, and the dirty needles that you find in the gutter outside. So obviously I'm not just talking about running, of course. I'm talking about things that are harder than running. Community level change, structural change, making a difference in the lives of our neighbors and our community, and why it's so dang important that even when it gets hard, we find a way to keep going. So I want to share with you the 3 lessons that I've learned from running that I think translate well to talk about this. It's easy starting out, just make it to the next block, and never waste a downhill. Lesson 1, it's easy starting out. This one seems obvious. All you gotta do is go outside. You don't even have to do that, you could run inside. Find a place to run. Lean forward a little bit, put one foot in front of the other and let gravity do the rest. It feels natural, right? After a few steps, you start to build up speed, some momentum, feel the breeze in your face, and look at you, you're doing it, you are really running. Congratulations. I love the beginning of a race, especially a big one. Thousands of people gathering together, music is thumping and exciting, it's dark, the air is just electric. There's this collective sense of us. We're going to do this. We're going to run and we're going to finish and it's going to be great. Look at us go. We are so awesome. Can't help but be excited. Invariably, as you stand in that corral, you begin to look around at the other runners, sizing them up, how they compare to you, deciding which ones look like real runners. Look at that guy. How old is he? Is that a fanny pack that he's wearing? Look at those shoes. Ugh. You're sizing up your competition, who you're running against, not who you're running with. I want to tell you, whatever race you're running, don't give in to those competitive thoughts. When we view our neighbors as competitors rather than as teammates, it's a surefire way to take the joy out of the experience. Once you start running, you realize really soon that what you thought was a solo exercise is really a group project. We're all in this together. And if you try to look out only for yourself, you're more likely to collide with somebody else, particularly if they too are only looking out for themselves. Like so much of life, running is really a community effort. The road is long. If we're going to get there, we must realize that we're all in this together, and therefore we have to look out for one another, encourage one another, and try not to get in each other's way. Lesson 2, just make it to the next block. So when you're running a race, before long you realize the crowd is starting to thin out. People are still cruising around. Some are starting to walk. Some are stopping entirely, standing on the side of the road, stepping out, distancing themselves from what the rest of the community is doing. Invariably, you see this happening and doubt begins to creep in your mind. Should I still be doing this? Should I walk? Why did I even sign up for this race? Is there a way for me to get out of this and quit without anybody noticing? In any race, there are a million points along the way where you may feel like giving up. I get it. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. It feels lonely. It often makes you hurt. Caring about something and sticking with it to the end requires incredible commitment, stamina, and grit. Well, starting out is easy. Continuing down the road is hard. The rallying music from the beginning has faded. You might not be able to see the finish line yet. It feels impossibly far away. So maybe you pull over to the side, stop, and disconnect a bit from that community. Now, I want to be honest and say it's okay to take a break from whatever it is you got going on if you need to. Absolutely no shame in that. We've all done it. But I have found that if you tell yourself, just make it to the next block, to the next stop sign, that light pole, whatever that next marker is, just a little bit farther down the road before you allow yourself that break. Often you get there and you find out you're not as tired as you thought you were. The exercise of giving yourself permission to stop is often a rest in and of itself. Lesson 3, never waste a downhill. Every race has hills, even here in Oklahoma. Some of them are big and hotly anticipated, like Gorilla Hill here, where people in a big yellow house dress up like bananas and monkeys and have a 30-foot inflatable gorilla and hand out bananas. You know it's coming, you're excited about it, and you find a way to push through that hill. But other hills are less notable, smaller, less steep, rolling long hills like the highways in western Oklahoma, where it feels like you're on that hill forever and you don't think you'll ever reach the top. But you do, and every time you reach the top, it feels like something to be celebrated. Whew, I made it. Maybe I'll scale back a little bit. I should rest now that I've made it up that tough hill. Because what goes up must come down, and going down is the easy part, right? One of my former running buddies used to yell at the top of every hill, "Never waste a downhill." And I would get mad, but still laugh and chuckle at her for saying that, because she realized that it's very natural to want to stop trying as hard when you get to the easy part. Just coast for a little bit. But that kind of complacency is exactly how the hare lost the race to the tortoise, right? In Aesop's fables. When we see that things may be easier ahead, we really should continue to press on, if not press harder. The wind is at our back. We can accomplish more than we might have otherwise. We should take that opportunity to call out to those around us, rallying them to the cause, those coming up the hill and those ahead of us that are pushing on, and not let that downhill go to waste. We must keep going. I think that's important to point out, particularly as we near the election in just a couple of weeks, that the end is not the election. Democracy doesn't start or stop on November 3rd. Now, we all know that there's going to be an issue with counting ballots, and it's going to take perhaps a while to know who wins this election from the presidential race on down. But that's not the case. Our communities, our democracy was here before either of these guys was running for president, and it will persist long after they're here. The road is long. The race requires all of us to keep going. Now, those are my 3 points. It's easy when it's starting out, make it to the next block, never waste it downhill. But if you will permit me, I have one other thing that I wanted to add. When I was writing this up, I ended up typing this last night because it just kept coming to mind. We'll call it, lesson 4. Don't make it about yourself. On April 30th, 2017, I was running the Memorial Half Marathon, per usual. And I was feeling all the things that I've mentioned today. I was not into it. It was cold, rainy. I had not really trained. Starting out, I could feel it in my bones, or at least in my mind, that it was going to be a bad race. I was hurting, or imagining that I was hurting, struggling to keep going. And I wasn't, 4 miles into it, on 23rd Street, coming underneath the highway, heading west, going up the hill to McDonald's, ready to quit, thinking about how I could just step to the side, walk back to my car, and go home. No one would have to know. And about that time, I ran into my friend Addie. Now, Addie is a wonderful yoga instructor and a gifted writer. And I found out recently that she is a lifelong advocate for freeing the dolphins. I also happen to know that Addie is a ultra marathoner, like a legit runner, not someone like me who happens to have a pair of tennis shoes and runs around the neighborhood a few times. 50 milers, 100 milers, this is no big deal to her. She ran a backyard ultramarathon during COVID already. I mow the yard. Those are not comparable. So I run into Addie, and she is on the hill struggling to hold a wheelchair still while she pulls a rain fly over the little girl that's her rider there. And so I stop to help because I can see that she's struggling, and we continue on down the road. We jog some, we walk some, and I've seen people in wheelchairs at races before, but I assumed that the person pushing them was always a friend or relative, and I asked her how she knew this little girl. And Addie said she didn't. She had just volunteered, and they matched her up. So a couple miles down the road, Addie very graciously says, "Andy, you can go on ahead. We're just slowing you down." Little did she know that at this point, they were the only reason that I was still going. Addie and Mariella had changed my trajectory of that entire race. Because when I started running with them, I realized that this race was not about me, and it never should have been, right? From the very beginning, runners were streaming past us. It's tough to run fast when you're pushing an extra 70 pounds up the hill. But everyone that ran by was so encouraging, saying, "Good job, keep going, you're doing great." And they weren't talking to us at all. They were talking to Mariella, who was a little ray of sunshine. And for every person that walked by, she would call after them, "Thank you." For the next 10 miles or so, I had the honor and privilege of running beside Addie and Mariella. And as we got close to the finish line, Addie leans over quietly and says, when we get to the finish line, her family's going to meet us there with her walker so that she can cross the finish line on her own. I thought that sounded great. I had no idea what to expect. And so we get there, we're coming down that main corral, and as you've probably seen, or if you've been a runner, you know that the end of the Memorial Marathon is an exciting moment. People are lined on both sides of the street. It's loud, it's exciting on its own. I had never experienced anything like this. And so we stop about 20 feet before the finish line. And I think this photo explains it, what that experience was like there. You can see Marella's face as she crossed that finish line. I had been focused that whole day on just getting the finish line by myself, making it about me. And if that's where you are at today because that's where you need to be, I get it. And that's okay. It's perfectly fine. You've got to be present for yourself. Get that? I affirm that. But hear me out. You also got to show up for the folks around you. America has this thing about rugged individualism, bootstraps and blazing your own trail. And, we like to think that we've got it figured out as a country. In truth, we're like a teenager who thinks they can make it in the world because they've got some old beat up car and a job at Subway making sandwiches. That doesn't mean that you can do it on your own. Too often we, the collective we, societal we, fail to appreciate or even acknowledge the relationships and the reciprocity that we have with other nations, with other states, other cities, towns, neighborhoods across the highway, and people who live right next door. What if we acted like we're all running side by side? What if this run isn't a race? It's just fun with friends. What if your neighbor needed you to push them? What if you need your neighbor to push you? All right. Chris, I'm going to kick it back to you. Are you ready to shine some happy light on our hearts?
I am. And this is also partly a tribute to the artist that performed this song, because it's by Johnny Nash, who passed away just recently, the same day as Eddie Van Halen. So but I feel like, kind of after what you just said, which was amazing, it was inspiring, I think this song kind of fits that.
All right, take it away.
All right. I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. Gonna be a bright, sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, sunshiny day. I think I can make it now, the pain is gone. All of the bad feelings have disappeared. Here is the rainbow I've been praying for. Gonna be a bright, sunshiny day. Look all around, nothing but blue skies. Look straight ahead, there's nothing but blue skies. Oh, yeah. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my
Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks to Chris for the rockin' music today. Thanks again to Scott and Elizabeth for help with the readings. Before we go, one last thing. Civic Saturday is designed to be about us. About you, about me, and about all of us. And about our community. So as we move forward, and we're going to be doing more of these, we would love to have you be involved. If you want to volunteer to help out, to read a civic scripture or read a poem, play some music, anything. If you've got other ideas, we're open to it. We'd love to have you be a part of this. We'd love to reach new communities, new parts of our own community, and help bring everybody in this together. If you're an organization or a community that wants to be a co-host for a Civic Saturday, we'd love to help partner up. I will do all the organizational legwork, and you can do your part, and we can do this together. If you're interested in that, please go to our website, letsfixthisok.org. Scroll all the way to the bottom, and there's a little contact form there. Just drop in the information there. It'll send me an email, and I will get back to you just as soon as I can. Also, if you enjoyed today and you want to see more of this kind of thing, more voter education, more civic engagement, more ways to, tickle your politically curious mind, please consider supporting Let's Fix This with a financial donation. You can also do that on our website by going to letsfixthisok.org/donate. On that note, have a great weekend, everybody.